Hello everyone! We are yet another day into the clown decade, and things only seem to be getting worse. This has to be one of the most horrific things that I have seen coming out of the NHS. Especially given that there was news out recently that doctors and nurses at the NHS could outright refuse treatment on people if they felt they were being racist. Why is that relevant? Well, because of this. Blog on the official NHS website. Dear White People in the UK by Ashnine Benjamin, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Lead at the Nursing and Midwifery Council. Now I wanted to get a bit of background detail on exactly who this Ashnine is, because she's the lead of diversity, equality and all that garbage for a particular board within the NHS. So I just want to get a bit of detail on the type of person that gets that job and writes this guff. So, as you can see, she's Equality, Diversity and Human Rights professional working at the British Medical Association, and tweets are her own views. And, you know, it's clearly just equality guff, as you'd expect. So, sexism still exists in a medical profession where over half of medical students are women. It's like, by the BMA, which I think she worked for. It's just a load of retweets of guff and, oh, there's no evidence of structural racism in medicine. Here's a full critique of the Sewell/Race report by the BMA. Now, for those who don't know, the Sewell report was a report done officially by the government into its public institutions to decipher where structural racism actually is. And they basically found nothing. And so, in this case, they don't trust the experts, because they only trust the experts in very certain cases. But yeah, as you can see, it's a load of stuff about the Sewell report. It's a load of stuff about how equality and everything like that is, you know, the testament to the highest degree. But she also retweeted David Lammy here. For my own mental well-being, I am not doing media interviews on Race Commission today. Like so many Britain's black community, I'm tired of the endless debate about whether structural racism exists, with little desire to actually address it. We are being gaslighted. Because, you see, I don't think David Lammy actually believes in this stuff, or at least if he does, he knows that it's on a very shaky foundation. But it's just a high-status opinion. It's just what the zeitgeist is for the media class, or the elites, if you want to call them that, just to say, yeah, there's structural racism everywhere. Do they do anything to change it? Do they bollocks? All David Lammy wants to do is talk about it because it gets him more donations. And it lets him get away with basically doing as much as he wants. So that's her Twitter, and as you can see, her own views are equality is everything. But she also has some LinkedIn articles, and one of these was actually Dear White People in the UK, which was written over a year ago, but only just recently has the NHS decided to publish it. But as you can see from January of this year, the importance of representation from a young age, where you are represented because you are British, therefore you are represented all over Britain. Doesn't matter what your skin colour is. And then, to BAME or not to BAME, that is the question in February, and that is basically just telling people, oh, use any language you want, because of that whole thing about BAME being racist or something. Turns out she doesn't care. I gave it a quick read. It's not very interesting. And I think it's about time we actually read this article. So, starting off strong here, for white people. That's people like me. First step, read the short essay White Privilege Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh, that visualises a physical representation of white privilege. Now, just a quick aside on this note, I have quickly read through that article, and I do just want to point out that they have 26 points in which they think constitutes of white privilege, and these things are just awful. So, 1, I can, if I wish, to arrange to be with the company of people of my own race most of the time. Anyone can actually do that, so I don't see how that's white privilege. If I need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area which I can afford and in which I would want to live. I mean, this is pretty horrible. This is just saying black people are poor. You know, it's like, oh, it's like Joe Biden's thing. It's like, oh, you know, one day black kids can be as clever as rich kids or something like that. Just completely racialising class. And you get further down, they just seem to get more crazy. Number 12 here, I can swear or dress in second-hand clothes or not answer letters without having people attribute these choices to the bad morals, poverty, or illiteracy of my race. This whole thing's just saying either racism exists or it's complete paranoia. And some are just outright saying statistics are happening. 18. I can be pretty sure that if I asked to talk to the person in charge, I will be facing a person of my race. Yes, most people in charge of majority white countries will be white. What a surprise. You're going further down, it just gets more mental. I can be sure that if I need legal or medical help, my race will not work against me. That's number 24. Where are they getting the statistics on this? Where are they finding the anecdotes of this? I've never heard of a story of a doctor in America or the UK where they don't operate on someone because of their race. And number 26 is just the worst. I can choose blemish cover or bandages in flesh colour and have them more or less match my skin. Again, in a majority white country, you're going to get, white flesh coloured bandages and things like that. That's just normal. They still offer darker skin tones of them. I've seen them all over pharmacies and Boots in the UK. Boots being a type of pharmacy for those of you in the US. So, there, I've read it, and I think it's retarded. Now what? So back to the article, Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, written by a white woman in the USA, captures a discussion that is often missing, about what is whiteness, for white people who often don't see themselves in racial terms. So already I have so many issues with this. Not only is Robin DiAngelo's whole book basically a massive Kafka trap for white people, basically saying, oh, if you get defensive, that just shows you have white fragility, and that's part of your white privilege playing in. So there's absolutely nothing you can say to her to destroy her argument, because her argument is basically all white people are racist no matter what. So even trying to engage with someone who has that level of thinking is completely pointless, which is why I'm just going through this article and laughing at it. Because the second main issue with this first paragraph is that both of these women are American and they are both white. America has a completely different relationship with racial issues compared to the UK. Because the UK has been a lot more tolerant of race than the US throughout the 20th century. You go back to the World War II times, there was a black company put somewhere in the northwest, and along with a white company as well, because the US Army was mainly segregated. And there were 3 pubs in this town where they'd all been located as they were moving over to Germany. And basically some of the white officers said to the pubs in the town, look, can you segregate the pubs please? Basically because that was the norm in America. So all 3 pubs in the town then put up signs saying black American soldiers only and ban the white ones. That is how different the US is to the UK, even going back just over 70 years. So then trying to apply a US paradigm on racial issues to the UK is completely wrong and pointless. Yet, this woman does it anyway. So, tips for white people. 1. Don't be defensive. This isn't personal and it's not really about you. Everybody is at a disadvantage when our formal institutions perpetuate inequalities. And this is where it, the single point, straightforward, this is pure Marxism. We are all about equality. There's any disparagement in the outcomes, that means that there must be some unjust goings-on within the process. Which is, of course, bollocks, because life isn't fair naturally. No matter how fair you make rules. I mean, it's like you play any board game or anything like that. There are always inequalities at the outcomes of games, despite the fact that everyone plays by the same rules. Even just thinking about that destroys that first argument. 2. Don't say I'm not political. To excuse yourself from this conversation. Right now, ignorance isn't an excuse. You can't unsee what you have seen. Yeah, I really can't ignore seeing you write this guff and coming across as a complete buffoon. 3. You don't have to be vocal, but do listen. Listening means being open to hearing what black and minority ethnic people are saying, be open to their lived experience if they choose to talk about them. You would be hard pushed to find a black or Asian person that doesn't have a personal story of racism. Yeah, I know a lot of white people that have experienced racism too, but you don't listen to them, do you? 4. Work on your empathy. Visualise yourself in the other person's shoes. Discrimination is dehumanisation, and the only way to see a person as human is to empathise with them. Yeah, it's human nature to have empathy, only psychopaths don't. 5. Be uncomfortable. Work on your empathy. By the way, I want you to be really uncomfortable. Yeah, you're really showing your empathetic side there. If you can read 1 book, watch 1 video, visit 1 place in this list, that is a step towards change. Well, I have read the article that you told me to, and it's actually reinforced my views that this whole thing is a race grift. And surprise, surprise, that theme carries on. So, for everyone, There are some quick reads that summarise, for a UK audience, how a poor understanding of history of race and what race really is has created our current structurally racist system. So these are some awful, awful suggestions, by the way, but you have Afua Hirsch's Brit-ish. For those who don't know, Afua Hirsch is a Guardian columnist and professional race grifter, obviously. Akala's Race and Class in the Ruins of Empire, and Rennie Edo-Lodge's Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, with accompanying About Race podcast. And by the way, before I carry on, I have done a video review of that book, link in the description. Do give it a look, because it goes into detail about why that book is awful. And White Privilege, The Myth of a Post-Racial Society by Kalwant Bhopal, exploring the subtleties of modern-day racism in the UK and the USA. And just for me to hammer another point home, this is exactly how race grifting works. I see, for example, Rennie Edo-Lodge's Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race being referenced everywhere as a good source to read about. And that's how she makes her money, by people circularly referencing her and saying, go read this book. And all these race grifters will constantly reference each other and tell everyone to read all of their books, go to all their blogs, donate to all of them. And it's exactly the same here. It is just a professional circle jerk, and idiots actually pay for it. Which is why Rennie Edo-Lodge's book is the only one I've actually bought when it comes to this subject. I'm not going to buy another one, because I know it's all just a grift, and I don't want to give them my money for it. So for the rest of this, she then basically does as I have just said there. I mean, she calls... Sorry, I just found it really funny, but she calls what I have just described, this whole circle jerk of race grifters, for a lack of a better term, she calls them a black intellectual powerhouse. And that just to me seems really cringe, so I'm not going to read all this because it's literally about 5-6 paragraphs just saying, oh, you know, read these books by black authors on how white man is the devil. Oh, you don't like books? Listen to a podcast. You don't like that? Go on a Black History walk or tour. Or explore the British Blacklist, an online platform which celebrates African and Caribbean creative professionals. It's like, great, have all this, I don't care. But don't try and say it's a racist country when these things are constantly celebrated and pushed. Next, she then grifts for research think tanks. So in the UK, we have some established race equality think tanks. The Institute of Race Relations publishes the excellent Race and Class Journal, and a newsletter on anti-racism and social justice activities in the UK and Europe that you can sign up to, sobering reading on racist attacks that continue daily, right? The Runnymede Trust and the Race Equality Foundation publish research on racial inequality in the UK. If you just want stats and data, the UK government website, Ethnicity Facts and Figures, is comprehensive. Amazing how it's like, if you want stats, she doesn't say, go to the ONS. Probably because the Office of National Statistics probably doesn't make her case that much better. But no, it's got to be all these think tanks that are specifically researching for their racial agenda. I'm sorry, call me cynical, but I just do not trust their findings, as I don't with any leftist organisation at this point. Next is another bit of evil, one that really gets me every time, and a really good reason, I think, to homeschool your kids. So, educating our children. The thing is, that should really be saying educating your children, because obviously she sees everything in a racial line, and thinks that it's mainly the white kids that need educating on this, because she probably educates her own kids on this. Anyway, Black British history is British history. I agree Black British history is British history, actually. I don't agree that Black history is British history. That's a ridiculous thing to say, along with white history is British history. Because it isn't. White history, and even then it's had a push, is the history of Europe. And even that I don't agree with, because I think if you racialise history, you have absolutely no context on how the peoples previous to us actually thought and lived. But then she goes on to say, if it isn't in the curriculum, the next generation are at a disadvantage and the risk repeating the ignorance that has led to our current situation. I mean, it's ridiculous. The only thing I ever learned about the British Empire was slavery, and it wasn't even the abolition of slavery, which is amazing. Your average British curriculum is you learn a bit about 1066, you then mainly learn about the Tudors, and then a bit about the Gunpowder Plot. And then, for some goddamn reason, you skip 400 years and go into the 20th century with World War I and II. Barely anything is ever done about the Georgians, the Hanovers. You do a bit about the start of the empire with Elizabeth, but it's not really made clear. There's nothing about Nelson. There's nothing about Wellington. And even then, when you get to World War One and Two, you have barely anything in it about the actual British Empire. It is mainly focused on the Western Front. And even then, it's a main focus on the bloody Blitz. So to say we need more education on slavery and, black history is ridiculous. We need better education on our actual history. Get more in about the Empire and not just the bad parts of it, for God's sake. She goes on, a book that summarises the situation in the UK is Tell It Like It Is, How Our Schools Fail Black Children, edited by Brian Richardson, and a video that captures the impact of a white mainstream media and narrative that perpetuates stereotypes is the White Doll, Black Doll Experiment by Kenneth B. Clark and Mimie P. Clark. This experiment has been recreated globally with similar outcomes, including in the UK. And just for clarification, I decided to watch that White Doll, Black Doll experiment. Long story short, I have no idea what came of the Clark's research back in the day. We're talking about 50 years or something like that with their research. But the video is a minute long, and it is of an American woman doing the same thing. So basically, you get kids and you put a white skin tone doll and a black skin tone doll in front of the kids. And basically what it turns out is, in the video, it just shows a bunch of black kids saying they either prefer the white doll, and then they're asked which the nice one is, and they choose the white one and say because it's white and the black one's bad because it's black. And these kids are like 4 to 6 years old. But then there is a disclaimer at the end basically saying, oh, this was an experiment on 21 kids. That is basically an anecdote. That is not worth taking anything off. So to say that our white mainstream quote-unquote has caused this problem, I think is a bit ridiculous. Because you have no idea why 15 out of those 21 kids prefer the white doll. That could have entirely been instilled from their parents, for God's sake. Anyway, the Black Curriculum Organisation, founded by Lavinia Stennett, has resources and run workshops for children to learn about Black British history. The book, The History of the African and Caribbean Communities in Britain, by Hakim Adi, is a simple book that primary school age children can revisit. Buy books and toys that show the true diversity of the world we live in. This is Book Love sells multicultural books for children. See what I mean? Constant race grift. This is funded by the NHS. Taxpayer money went to this to then basically advertise this whole black intellectual powerhouse, or as I am now going to call it, the race grifting circle jerk. And now finally we have the call to action. 1. Become informed and do what you can to change the one-story narrative so that the future generations don't remain in the dark. She doesn't mean change the one-story narrative. She means make sure we all follow my story and narrative. 2. Be conscious and have intention in your actions. What will you do differently? Absolutely nothing, so I know I'm not racist. 3. Understand the reasons behind the current disparities that exist in society. I know why they exist, it's the Pareto distribution. 4. Use your power and your privilege for the benefit of humanity. Everyone has some level of power or privilege at home, socially, or at work. Break the foundations of structural racism. You need to point these out. You can't just keep saying there are disparities in the outcomes. That doesn't show where the structural racism is. 5. Vote. Use that little bit of power that you have. No matter what your political leanings, see the work of Operation Black Vote. Go on, then you've got an About Us page. At our core, Operation Black Vote exists to ensure we have greater racial justice and equality throughout the UK. So they're Marxists. We work specifically but not exclusively within the democratic and civil framework to deliver our objectives. So they're borderline revolutionaries. We seek to inspire BME communities to engage with our public institutions in order to address the persistent race inequalities we face in areas such as education, health and employment. Our work spans a number of areas, including voter registration, lobbying politicians, mentoring schemes, and political leadership programs. Our work began in July 1996, 16th at the House of Commons, as a collaboration between two organisations. Charter 88, oh no, that's very close to being bad, which campaigns for democratic reform, and the 1990 Trust, a national generic policy research and networking organisation. After 19 years of campaigning, our voice is now heard at the highest level of government, both nationally and locally. But perhaps of greater importance is the fact that we are often viewed as a beacon of hope and support for our own communities. So, amazingly, the NHS has paid for this blacktivist to essentially put out a whole propaganda piece to then say, vote for this political organisation. I'm sorry, NHS, that is not appropriate. You should not be there encouraging activism. You are there as nothing more than a healthcare service. Publishing this was an awful move, and honestly, I really hope you get the defunding you deserve. We need a much better system, because now it's become such a monolith. It's got a monopoly on healthcare in the UK, making private healthcare excessively expensive, and so most people can't afford that, so they have to get in the big old queue to get to the NHS. I know people that have waited years for surgery because of this, and now you come out with all this blacktivism, trying to be race grifters, paying our money to these complete morons, these grifters, these awful, awful people. So let's finish this off. Finally, if you are a leader of people in any capacity and you are yet to be convinced about the positive benefits of working with or engaging with diverse people, read Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. No, I'm not going to read anything you recommend, because it is a massive circle jerk and just a money-making scheme to you, and you say diversity isn't a fun to have, it's a must-have. Well, I'm afraid to say it's not a must-have, because as soon as you get the diversity you want, you become pointless. You want these divisions to continue because it gets you free money. It gets the literal NHS to pay you to write crap articles like this. Anyway, no doubt this isn't going to be the last thing that annoys me about the NHS, and it's definitely not going to be the last racial grift I see from the NHS either. The whole thing needs to collapse. It's gone too far now. I really wish that Labour's whole narrative of the Tories are going to privatise and sell off the NHS were true. But it's not, I'm afraid, and that really annoys me. Anyway, that was everything I had for you today. So, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.